How dumb was actually Kevin Malone? Well, according to pretty much everyone who has ever watched the show, the answer is very. But here's the thing, it's actually not that simple. Because when you really sit down and look at him closely, scene by scene, you start to realize that the question itself might be a little more complicated than it first appears. And that's exactly what we're going to get into today. Now, to answer this properly, we need to know a little bit more about who Kevin Malone actually is. Kevin is introduced in the very first season of The Office as one of the accountants at Dunder Mifflin's Scranton branch. He sits alongside Oscar Martinez and Angela Martin in the accounting department. He is loud,
There's a lot of junk in here. Over.
slow, food-obsessed, and almost permanently confused by the most basic things happening around him. He is also, somehow, one of the most beloved characters in the entire series. So before we start asking how dumb Kevin really was, we need to understand what we're actually dealing with here. And by dumb, I mean genuinely bad at processing the world around him. Yeah, let's start at the very beginning. In the pilot episode alone, Kevin is introduced as a man who works in accounting. Accounting. This is a job that requires a working understanding of numbers, financial records, and basic arithmetic. Kevin cannot reliably count. He cannot follow a simple conversation without losing the thread halfway through. He once spent an entire morning trying to figure out if he had won the lottery, only to eventually conclude that he had not after someone else had to count his numbers for him. That is where we are starting. That is the baseline. So, what makes Kevin so fascinating to talk about? The problem isn't just that he's not very smart. A lot of sitcom characters aren't very smart. The problem is that Kevin Malone is employed as an accountant. That is the central joke that the show is constantly returning to. He has a job that requires precision and accuracy, and he brings to that job a brain that seems to operate roughly at the level of a golden retriever who has just woken up from a nap. It should not work. It makes no sense. And yet, somehow, Dunder Mifflin keeps him around for 9 full seasons. Now, let's look at this objectively. There is an argument, and fans make it constantly, that Kevin is not actually as dumb as the show presents him. The theory goes that Kevin is deliberately performing stupidity because it gets him out of work and lowers everyone's expectations of him. And you know what? There are moments in the show where that argument almost holds up. Almost. Because then Kevin opens his mouth and reminds you that no performance is this committed, this consistent, and this completely devoid of self-awareness. Here is one of the most famous examples. Kevin, at some point, decides that speaking in full sentences is simply too much effort.
Hunt down the original for me?
Yes, me do. All right.
He begins removing words from his sentences to save time. He explains this to the documentary crew with complete sincerity, telling them that he has done the math, and that by cutting out unnecessary words, he saves something like 35 minutes every day. He is visibly proud of this. He thinks he has cracked a code. The problem, of course, is that the words he is removing are not unnecessary. They are the words that make sentences mean things. Without them, nobody understands what he is saying, which means he then has to spend far more than 35 minutes repeating himself, being asked to clarify, and standing in doorways looking confused. He has made his own life significantly harder in the name of efficiency. That is not strategy. That is Kevin. And yet, here is where it gets interesting. Kevin is not completely without moments of genuine competence. He is, by all accounts, an extraordinary poker player. This is established early in the series when the office holds a poker game and Kevin absolutely destroys everyone at the table, including people who are objectively far smarter than him. He reads people. He calculates odds. He bluffs with total confidence. Then he wins. This is the same man who once tried to carry a giant pot of chili into the office and dropped it within 15 seconds of walking through the door, and then attempted to scoop it back up off the carpet with his hands. These two things exist inside the same person. Let that sink in for a moment. Later in the series, we see Kevin demonstrate a surprisingly sharp instinct when it comes to people's emotional states. He is often the one in the room who picks up on tension between characters before anyone else does, even if he cannot articulate what he is sensing. There is a moment where he tells Jim and Pam, completely casually, that he could tell they liked each other from the very beginning. And he is right. He saw it before most of the office did, so something is happening behind those eyes. We just cannot always be sure what it is. But then Kevin does something like attempt to file his own taxes and end up owing money to a state he has never visited. And we are right back to square one. The writers of The Office made a very specific and frankly risky choice with Kevin's character. They kept escalating how dumb he was with each passing season. In the early seasons, Kevin is slow and a little dim, but functional. He shows up. He does his job at some recognizable level. He participates in conversations. But by the later seasons, Kevin has become almost a different character entirely. He is childlike in ways that border on unbelievable. He talks about food the way other people talk about loved ones. We forgot what the word plan meant mid-sentence. He needed help understanding why a sign that said wet floor was relevant to him personally. This escalation is, honestly, the most interesting thing about Kevin from a writing perspective. Because the show is asking you to believe that this man has been employed as an accountant at the same company for nearly a decade, and nobody has fired him. And not only that, but nobody seems particularly alarmed by him. His coworkers have simply absorbed Kevin's limitations into their daily routines the way you absorb a broken step on your staircase. You know it's there. You step over it every day. You have stopped questioning why it hasn't been fixed. Oscar, who sits directly next to Kevin and is one of the sharpest people in the office, has essentially accepted that part of his job is quietly correcting Kevin's work before anyone notices. Angela, who is rigid and exacting about everything, has made her peace with Kevin's existence in the accounting department in a way that tells you she has run the numbers and concluded that complaining about it further is simply not worth her energy. These are the real victims of Kevin Malone's employment, and the show treats them beautifully. Now, the finale of Kevin's arc in the series is genuinely something to talk about. It is revealed that Kevin was actually fired from Dunder Mifflin by Dwight after Dwight takes over as manager. And the reason Dwight gives is that Kevin has been so bad at his job for so long that the branch has been losing thousands of dollars annually just from his accounting errors alone. The joke was always that Kevin was terrible at accounting. The show just eventually confirmed that yes, the joke was real, the damage was real, and it had been quietly accumulating for years. And you know what? That is kind of brilliant. The show spent 9 seasons making you laugh at Kevin's incompetence, and then in the final stretch, it told you that all of that incompetence had actual consequences that nobody caught because everyone had simply stopped expecting anything from him. That is good storytelling hiding inside what looks like a simple recurring gag. So, how dumb was Kevin Malone? Well, dumb enough to drop a full pot of chili in the first 10 seconds of carrying it. Dumb enough to cost his company thousands of dollars over nearly a decade without anyone catching it until it was far too late. And somehow, smart enough to hold down a job in accounting for 9 years without a single formal qualification ever being questioned out loud. Kevin Malone is, in the end, one of the most layered comedy characters in modern television history. Not because he is secretly a genius, he is not, but because the show used his limitations to say something quietly true about how workplaces function, how people accommodate incompetence, and how a person can be simultaneously the funniest and the most quietly costly presence in any room. And he made a really good chili. Apparently. We'll just have to take his word for it. Alright, that's gonna be it for this video. If you are a fan of The Office, then please drop a like and subscribe to the channel because I have a lot of banger videos coming. Until next time, thanks for watching.